In this video, I'm going to show you how to differentiate the different types of white blood cells, and then I'm going to give you a chance to practice identifying them. So there are two groups of white blood cells. There are granulocytes and agranulocytes. The granulocytes are neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils, so they all end with phil. And the agranulocytes are lymphocytes and monocytes. So there's a couple things you can look at to tell them all apart. You can look at the size. So to determine how big it is, you just want to compare it to the red blood cells around it. So just picture how many red blood cells could I put inside of each white blood cell. So for example, the neutrophil, I would say I could fit 2 to 3 red blood cells inside. The eosinophil and basophil are both about the same size, 2 to 3 times the size of a red blood cell. The lymphocyte, so the nucleus is usually about the size of 1 red blood cell. So that's about 1 red blood cell, and that usually stays the same. However, what can change is the amount of cytoplasm outside of the nucleus. So you might have more or less cytoplasm, but you're always going to have your nucleus be about the size of 1 red blood cell. And the monocyte is the biggest one. You could easily fit 5 red blood cells in there, and that's probably the quickest way to tell it's a monocyte. It's just the fact it's so large. So you can see that the neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocyte basically have the same color scheme, so color doesn't really help you there. But the eosinophil is the only one that is going to be more of a red color when you're comparing it to the red blood cell. The basophil is a dark purple color. Also, the eosinophil and basophil, you see how they both look grainy? Well, they're in the granulocyte family because granulo means like a grain, cyte means a cell, so they're literally just grainy cells. Neutrophils, sometimes they look grainy, sometimes they don't, so you can't really count on the graininess factor. What is helpful is just looking at the nucleus. They all have nuclei that are really different. So neutrophil is the only one that's going to have a multi-lobe nucleus. There could be anywhere from 3 to 6. Or sometimes an immature neutrophil, before the nucleus kind of separates into separate lobes, you'll get one skinny horseshoe. Eosinophil usually has 2 circular nuclei. Basophils are generally stained so dark purple you can't even see their nucleus. Lymphocytes will have just the one circular, and the monocyte, sometimes it's a kidney bean, sometimes it's kind of like a thick horseshoe, but it's a large, chunky, irregular nucleus of some kind. Now I want to point out a couple mistakes I've seen quite a few students make. So it's really important you're thinking about the size, color, and the nucleus, as well as the texture, if it's grainy or not. Because if you just think basophil, purple, and you see this picture on the left, the first thing you notice is purple, you say basophil. No. How you can tell this is a lymphocyte is there is a small halo of cytoplasm outside of that dark purple nucleus, and it doesn't look grainy at all, whereas the basophil is quite obviously grainy. So sometimes people mess up neutrophils and monocytes, especially this is an immature neutrophil, but you can tell it's a neutrophil in two ways. It has a singular skinny nucleus. You can see it's not as thick as that. And also it's still only the size of 2 to 3 red blood cells. So now we're at the point where you should be ready to do some practice identification. If there's anything you get wrong and you're not sure why, just leave a comment. I can usually get back to people within a day. So I think it's helpful first to see if you can tell what they all are when you're looking at all of them. So starting here, this is a lymphocyte, and you can tell because it has the one large circular nucleus. Next door is the neutrophil, because it has a multi-lobe nucleus and it has that grainy kind of sandy appearance. Remember, you don't always see grains in sand, but this one does happen to have a nice appearance of being grainy. This is a monocyte, and you can tell because it's quite large and it has the singular chunky kind of nucleus. On the bottom left is the eosinophil. You can tell because it is red and grainy. Next to that is the basophil, because it's purple and grainy. And the last one is another monocyte. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of single examples. I'm going to give you 10 seconds for each, and then I'll flip over the answer.